Chapter 281 Entering the Desolate City. The journey ahead of them would involve traveling across mountains and rivers and breaking through brambles and thistles. Some who were following the latest hits hummed along the journey as they slowly advanced, following the railway. A few were immersed in thoughts about their future, but they eventually felt uncertain when they collected their thoughts, knowing that they were still in the midst of a dangerous adventure. None of them were in the mood to enjoy the pleasant scenery, as they knew they were in the demon beast's territory. Apart from the relatively thrilling experience at the tunnel, the journey had been rather peaceful. They had not encountered any similarly large groups of beasts since then. With their current strengths, they did have the ability to look after themselves against ordinary demon beasts. After spending more than 10 days traveling, Jinlin City was finally visible in the distance. They came up to another hill, which also had a tunnel the railway was leading into. This time, they decided to take an alternative route instead of going through the pitch-black tunnel. They immediately saw a spacious basin when they arrived at the top of the hill. Plenty of foothills could be seen, leading in the distance toward their destination. In the north was a river with many bends and curves, eventually ending up running alongside the remains of a city, now overgrown with plant life. The river continued to extend into the distance and bent towards the east, toward the hill that the group had just crossed. That would be Jinlin City. It's only been 15 years. How did it end up like this? Zheng Bingxiao wondered, staring at the distant, desolated city. It's pretty much expected, since the beasts were using it as a habitat. The houses, streets, and roads would be utterly destroyed. The plants are intaking their waste as fertilizer, so they can grow very fast. You will find the whole place crawling with moss, vines, and weeds, Qingqing said. Come, we should scout the outer area first and count the beasts roaming around, Songsha suggested. The periphery of the city was a big open plain surrounded by woods, and also one of the key places to be investigated. If there was any point in reconstructing the city, they had to know if the perimeter was occupied by the beasts. Fortunately, they were not sent here to wipe out every single beast from Jinlin City. It was big enough to be described as a second-grade city. Even the perimeter alone was more spacious than they could have imagined, let alone the city that was now a den for the beasts. It would be quite impossible to restore it to a human habitat without a few army brigades. After spending some time investigating the woods, the group was surprised to find out that they only saw a few individual demon beasts searching for food, instead of moving in groups. In the end, the investigation around the city's perimeter was carried out smoothly. They marked the map grids with green ticks, implying that there were only a few beasts roaming in them. Let's head inside. We should finish our task and head back earlier. I feel quite uncomfortable staying out here, Luo Song proposed. In fact, Luo Song had toned down significantly over the past 10 days. Either way, he did not want to suffer any longer by staying outside of the safe zone. This kind of investigation will take quite some time. Besides, the places we are investigating are extremely huge. We have already marked the spots on the map, unless we are splitting up. Splitting up isn't a rational decision, Songsha shook her head. If the 17 of them could stick together, they still stood a chance against beasts that were inclined to move in groups. It would be a completely different scenario if they were to split up. We'll check one spot out at a time. The 17 people made their way into the desolated city. The road that was meant to be used for transportation into the city was fully blocked with rusted, abandoned cars. The way they had ended up was enough to illustrate how the people decided to abandon their cars to flee for their lives during the incident. Things like cars were quite useless in a large-scale calamity, since they relied heavily on roads. They began to see remains of houses after passing along the highways. The main road had been broken apart. The cracks spread throughout the entire road, with plants growing in the gaps. It felt like the life force of the trees alone was enough to drill across the road. The houses were entirely covered in dust, stacked densely together. Vines continued to climb upward and into the windows, growing thickly and leaving the inside in a total mess. The trees everywhere lacked someone looking after them and seemed to be shrouding the heavens. Currently, the students from both the Imperial College and the Pearl Institute were walking on the main road. They could hear occasional animal cries in the distance, explaining their alert expressions. This residential area was the first place they needed to investigate. Judging from the data, it was highly possible that this area was previously the territory of beasts, as most of the rooms had animal droppings piled up in a corner. I can't imagine what happened here. This used to be a city. Bai Tingting seemed to be quite sentimental as he sighed. When a city was at its end, when you could not find a living person on the streets, a person would feel quite lonely and devastated. It was something that they had not experienced before. Desolated was surely the best way to describe this city. We should find somewhere safe to settle ourselves, Shen Mingxiao proposed. We finally arrived at the city. We have to make sure we can escape easily. It should be near the edge, with some great defense, Lu Zhenga said. So where should we pick as our place? Song Sha asked. Inside a building, we should use one as our base. Some of them are connected to the others, allowing us to escape easily, Lu Zhenga went on. That's right, the taller buildings would also grant us a greater field of vision, which would be better for us when standing guard. Otherwise, it will be hard to tell if a large group of beasts is approaching. I think that one's not too bad, Mo Fan pointed at a building in the distance. A large, blocky building stood firmly in the distance. It did not look too filthy, as if it had been occasionally washed by the rain. Most importantly, the building seemed relatively fine compared to the other buildings. Not only did it have many floors, it had a magnificent aura to it, too. You do know how to pick the place, Song Sha let out a smile as she identified the building on the map. That used to be the city's administration hall. Chapter 282, definitely not a welcoming place. The group drew closer to the administration building after passing several residential areas. The administration building had 3 layers, each structured differently. The first layer was the administration hall, made up of several floors, rectangle-shaped, and covering a huge area. The second layer was a square-shaped section above the base. It was quite a contrast to the rectangular base below it. The third layer was a few tall blocks above the square-shaped layer. It probably belonged to the business units that were not open to the public. The whole building somehow did not feel like it belonged there, as it stood out too much among the buildings nearby. This place is on our investigation list, too. However, I feel this administration building is kind of weird. Take a look at those plants. They are not growing toward the sunlight, but into the building instead. Mu Nujiao had the plant element. She took a closer look at the vines and scorched branches. The vines were as thick as a man's waist. They seemed to be growing into the base of the administration building and intertwining with the other vines in the hall. The administration building was supposed to have plenty of sunlight. However, because of the vines, the light could no longer shine into the building, giving it an eerie atmosphere. It felt more like a forest of vines than a building. Rows of chairs set up for the public were scattered everywhere. The whole place was full of dust. Moss could be seen spreading across the cracking windows. Boxes of documents had been dropped to the floor as the people freaked out during the invasion, now stained with weird liquid emitting a foul scent. 1 or 2 should keep an eye outside. The rest will head into the building, Lu Zhenga advised the group. I'll stay, Mo Fan volunteered. Me too, Bai Tingting said. Lu Zhenga and Song Sha glanced at the two before leading the others into the administration hall. The 14 students soon disappeared into the gloomy administration building. Only Mo Fan and Bai Tingting stayed at what used to be a garden in front of the building. Mo Fan glanced at Bai Tingting and recalled the astonishing sight of the twin bobbing hills he had seen at the river. He could not help but think, how is it possible for a girl currently in her 20s who doesn't have a boyfriend to have such huge boobs? Can her petite body really support the weight? If Bai Tingting were aware of Mo Fan's thoughts, she would definitely agree that it was more dangerous for her to stay outside with this guy than going into the building with the group. Bai Tingting was the healer of the group, thus they could not afford to place her in danger. As such, it was reasonable for her to wait outside. With Mo Fan's strength, he could easily be her guardian. That's strange. Bai Tingting seemed to have discovered something, and she slowly walked toward a bed of flowers. What is it? There's a pack of food here that's only half finished. Only part of it has started to rot, instead of the whole thing. Take a look for yourself. Bai Tingting put on a pair of gloves and picked up the pack from the ground. Mo Fan went up to her and took a closer look. It did indeed look like a pack of jerky. The seal was already open, but the jerky itself looked quite normal. It did not look like it had been here for 15 years. Inside the overgrown administration hall, Lu Zhenga and his violent Mark Wolf led the way. The latter leapt onto a platform and scanned its surroundings with a sharp gaze. The elevator was totally out of order, so they would have to find the stairs to reach the higher levels. There are a few traveling bags here. It seems like someone left them here, Liao Mingxuan said. They might belong to some hunters who visited here recently. Lu Zhenga did not place too much attention on them. He led the group to the hall on the second floor. The second floor was full of meeting rooms. The plants were even denser here. The entire hallway was nearly blocked by them. As they proceeded forward, they did see an elevator with its door open. The vines could be seen extending into the shaft. Its parts were rusted and were stained with some unknown colored liquid. The stairs should be just ahead. Lu Zhenga was quite bold indeed, leading the group with his violent Mark Wolf. Lu Zhenga had just started moving when Mu Nujiao, who was relatively observant, halted in her tracks. Her eyes were fixed onto the vines closest to the elevator's shaft. What is it? Liao Mingxuan was always staying close to Mu Nujiao. It looks like something is stuck between them. Mu Nujiao pointed at the gap between two vines. Liao Mingxuan finally had his chance to display his manliness. He reassured the lady while walking toward the vines and dragging the thing out. As he got a closer look, his mind went blank as his face turned pale white. A scalp. Liao Mingxuan was holding a human scalp in his hand, with the face still attached. Its long hair was hiding its face before, so Liao Mingxuan did not realize what it actually was. The scalp had dirty black hair and its face was detached from the head. Its eyeballs were still hanging from the skin. Liao Mingxuan had not expected it would be something so bizarre. A dead person. It's a dead person's head. Zhao Mingyue, who was nearby, let out a scream. As the scalp was pulled out, they were able to get a closer look at the thing stuck between the vines. It was a skull, and definitely human. The skin was filthy, but it had not rotted. The eyes looked rather alive, but the flesh was gone, and so was the blood. It was a corpse that had been sucked dry, and not longer than 10 days ago. There's one here too. What's going on? How did these people die here? Were they ambushed by some beasts? The group was flustered. Judging from the corpses and the objects scattered around, they were supposed to be a team of hunters, but they had somehow died a horrible death here. We've checked the place around. There wasn't any presence of beasts nearby, Shen Mingxiao said. Mu Nujiao and Qingqing exchanged glances with one another as a bad feeling arose within them. These plants feel strange, Mu Nujiao reminded the others. What plants? That's weird. Where did the path? Oh my god, the path we took to get in here is gone. Xu Delong, who was in charge of covering their rear, cried out in alarm. Everyone turned their heads and realized the path they took had somehow been blocked by the vines. The gap was now too tiny for them to squeeze through. Everyone was used to staying on guard for things that moved, and any hint of murderous aura from demon beasts. None of them had expected the plants to seal off their escape route out of nowhere. The path behind them was blocked, but the problem was, they had only used it a moment ago. It's the plants. They can move. Someone finally realized the terrifying truth. Run, quick! Lu Zhenga screamed out. The building was overgrown with plants consisting of thick vines and branches. A team of hunters had died here quite recently, and now their path behind was blocked. This administration building is definitely not a welcoming place. Chapter 283 Hunting Prey with Traps. The vines suddenly began to shift and move. Plants that were extremely careful to remain motionless just a moment ago suddenly made their move. The thick vines contracted toward the center. The group felt like they had been trapped inside a giant machine. Its gears were initially rotating slowly, and now it had finally awakened after the engine was heated up. The vines slowly gathered outside the elevator's shaft. Those in front altered their shapes into sharp, thorn spears, extending toward the group of students trapped by the vines. Holy crap, we're done for! Luo Song shrieked. He and Xu Delong were the closest to the rear. The vines close to the stairs were still writhing as they formed layers of walls, blocking their escape. The walls were so thick that it would be almost impossible to break through. Ah! Ah! Someone among the group uttered a terrifying scream. It turned out to be Song Sha, who had been stabbed by a sharp vine that had struck her from the side when she was aligning her fire element's star pattern. The vine in the shape of a spear drove into her abdomen, dragging her into the air toward the walls. Fresh blood splattered across the ground. Song Sha's mouth was totally filled with blood. She did not even have the strength to cry out. Everyone's mind went blank when they saw her being dragged around like sugar-coated candy on a stick. What the hell are you all waiting for? Run! Luo Song screamed and totally ignored Song Sha, who was slowly being devoured by the plants. We need to save her. There's nothing we can do. She's done for. Lu Zhenga snapped coldly, trying to calm everyone down. Ice Lock. Mu Ningzhu was the first to complete a spell. Her eyes were staring at Song Sha, who was being trapped inside the walls made of plants. The icy chains swiftly sprang forward and wrapped around Song Sha tightly. Mu Ningzhu held their other end and pulled with great force, dragging Song Sha out from the vines. Song Sha had a terrifying hole reaching from her abdomen to her back. Her blood splattered across the whole place while she was being pulled toward the group, an awful sight. The ice lock had managed to pull Song Sha back from the jaws of death. However, her injury was so severe that it was impossible for her to survive any longer. Her inner organs were damaged, and she had lost a great amount of blood. Ice spread. Freeze. Mu Ningzhu cast a spell again to freeze Song Sha's body. The frost rapidly covered the wounded young woman, sealing the wound to prevent her from losing any more blood. The blood finally stopped flowing from the wound, but Song Sha was on her last breath and lay on the ground in an extremely weak state. Her eyes were full of pain and unwillingness to die. "Hold on there, I'll bring you out." Mu Ningzhu looked into Song Sha's eyes. Song Sha's eyes were still wide open. Fresh blood slowly flowed out from her mouth. She looked utterly devastating. She never thought she would almost lose her life here and had never imagined that Mu Ningzhu would be the person who saved her. "I'll look after her," Mu Nujiao said to Mu Ningzhu. Mu Ningzhu nodded before turning around and casting a cold glance at Lu Zhenga. Lu Zhenga responded with an expressionless face. "I was considering the whole team. I'll give the orders from now on." Mu Ningzhu was not willing to let someone like Lu Zhenga, who had come from a military background, lead them. In such a person's eyes, other people's lives could be sacrificed at any time. "All right." Mu Ningzhu controlled the wind element and quickly made her way to the blocked path. The same vine spear that had attacked Song Sha suddenly thrust in from the side without any warning, aimed right at Mu Ningzhu's heart. If it landed, it would kill her instantly. The vine struck forward at an incredible speed, leaving no time for the magicians to react, let alone giving them enough time to cast an intermediate spell. Mu Ningzhu had already prepared herself for this. With a thought, pieces of pentagonal ice rapidly appeared around her. They immediately attached to her clothes as if they were magnetic. In under a second, the ice chips formed an elegant frozen armor around Mu Ningzhu. The armor was elegant yet sturdy, turning Mu Ningzhu into a princess clad for battle. Her elegance carried a hint of new imperiousness. The frosty armor wrapped around her tightly. The incoming vine snapped as if it had just collided with metal and was immediately withdrawn like an injured tentacle. Protection. Mu Ningzhu controlled the chains of the ice lock to revolve around the group. The icy chains immediately flew toward those who were being targeted by the vines to protect them. Water barrier. Sacred shield. Water barrier. The others could not afford to just stand there and watch. They immediately cast their defensive spells to protect one another. The walls are still collapsing. If they finish contracting, we will end up like the hunters. We have to find a way to break through. Zhao Manting said, "Does anyone have a death strike item? I don't suppose you're still not willing to use them at a time like this." Mu Ningzhu asked. Her ice lock was only suitable for use as protection under the circumstances. It was quite impossible to use it to break through the thick walls of interwoven vines. Mu Ningzhu, try to freeze the plants. That way, my light slash will be more effective. Ming Kong shouted. "Got it." Qingqing and Luo Song, who also had the ice element, immediately cast their ice spreads together with Mu Ningzhu. Due to the buff from her domain, the trio's ice spread was stronger than usual. The frost spread through the place swiftly, managing to freeze a few layers of the walls within just a few seconds. Rupture light slash. Ming Kong summoned a golden saber with a thought. The saber was made of hard light. The others immediately cleared a path for it when they saw it. Death strike magic equipment like this was expensive. It appeared that Ming Kong's renowned family was willing to spend some money on him, just to guarantee his safety. All magic equipment required energy to activate. Their maximum power would only be unleashed with sufficient energy. The death strike magic equipment that Ming Kong was currently holding was worth at least 10 million RMB. Its glow was extremely fiery, preventing the plants from getting any closer. As he slashed forward with the saber of hard light, the others only saw a crescent sun flying forward in a straight line, chopping the vine walls apart. It even set the vines on fire. Even though it was only a slash, it managed to clear a wide path. The vines seemed to be quite intimidated by it, the ones that were not damaged withdrawing from it hastily. "Nice one. Quick, we need to go now. The vines are closing in." Chapter 284 A Terrifying Giant Lizard. Out in the garden, Mo Fan and Bai Ting Ting stared at the building before them with blank faces. The vines coiling around the building began to wriggle as if they had come alive. It looked like they were trying to compete for the food they had just discovered. It was their first time seeing such a sight, as most magicians were used to treating plants as something harmless. Even when the place was overgrown with vines, they were only keeping an eye out for anything alive. They had never expected that the entire plant was in fact a demon beast, and its vines and branches were as deadly as weapons. "What should we do now? They are being trapped inside," Bai Ting Ting exclaimed urgently. The thick plant looked sturdier than the concrete walls. The group had already ventured deep into the building, so it would be extremely difficult for them to barge their way out. After all, the situation was similar to them jumping into a giant beast's esophagus. "Look up." Mo Fan pointed at the second layer of the administration building, which was the giant structure above the base. Bai Ting Ting raised her head and felt her scalp going numb. She could see a giant, hideous brain sticking out from the structure. The brain did not look the same as an animal's, but similar to the shape of a tree stump. If it weren't for the huge mouth that had suddenly opened up, no one would assume it to be something alive. The stump-shaped brain took up almost the entire second layer. Its endless vines were like nutrition pipes connected to its throat. From afar, it looked like a demon covered in tree skins sucking at something. A pseudomorphing demon beast. Bai Ting Ting took a deep breath. She experienced a tremendous shock, as it was her first time seeing such a monster with her own eyes. "Can someone tell me if this thing is a plant or a demon beast?" Mo Fan subconsciously took a step backward. The thing was literally a demon. It was using the administration building as its disguise, and the place looked so calm and peaceful, luring other things to use it as a temporary rest stop. The fact that there were no demon beasts roaming nearby was a clear indication that this place was extremely dangerous. Anything that was alive would surely find themselves falling into the demon's stomach, as it was basically a master of disguise. The unwary all ended up as nutrients for its growth. It's considered a demon beast with a pure lineage, extremely difficult to deal with once it's mature. Since it is scared of light, it will only reside in gloomy places. Somehow the administration building has become its natural habitat, which it could attach to as it grows, perfect for blocking the sunlight. Its prey would present themselves conveniently. Bai Ting Ting was surely the top student in the subject of studying demon beasts. She had managed to recognize a species that even the public had rarely heard of from the official channels. "I hope it's not commander level. I'll try attacking it with my fire," Mo Fan said. "Don't provoke it. Fire isn't very effective against it. Even double the size of our team has no chance against a pseudomorphing demon beast." Bai Ting Ting immediately stopped him. "So they're pretty much dead?" Mo Fan was stunned. Most likely, they would be wiped out within 10 minutes if the team did not have a light magician. Bai Ting Ting frowned. She had decided to stay because of Mo Fan, as she had a rather good impression of the man who had saved her life. To her surprise, the random thought she had prevented her from stepping into such a terrifying trap. There was nothing the two could do. They would be committing suicide if they went inside. They could only wait and reinforce the group if they managed to reach the entrance. Mo Fan felt his heart sinking. He could not care less about most of the others, but that did not include Mu Ningzhu, Mu Nujiao, and Zhao Manting. However, if fire wasn't effective against it, and lightning was also useless against plants, there was nothing he could do but wait outside. As the two were panicking, a black gust suddenly swept toward them like a tide, knocking the trees and everything else along the way aside. The objects on the ground rattled as a rusted bike was blown into the air before smashing into one of the buildings nearby, causing pieces of metal to fly wildly. Mo Fan and Bai Ting Ting were totally clueless as to what was happening. Their breathing intensified as cold sweat came out. The two exchanged glances with one another and saw the fear and disturbed look in each other's eyes. In the midst of the black tornado, a pair of giant wings enlarged as they moved rapidly toward the two. Under the wings was the body of a giant lizard. Its thick skin was fully covered with lumps, all the way from its head to the tip of its tail. Its long tail was half curled, and toward its end was a sharp edge which flickered sharply under the sunlight. "Run!" Mo Fan blurted out. The formidable aura alone had almost suffocated them. Those with a slightly weaker mental state would instantly fall unconscious. It was Mo Fan's first time experiencing such an overwhelming aura from a living beast, to an extent that his mind was swarmed with the urge to flee for his life. Bai Tingting froze on the spot. She could only look at Mo Fan with a pale face. Mo Fan grabbed her wrist. He could not care less about concealing his strength under such circumstances, and quickly cast Fleeing Shadow. Damn it, the alignment keeps failing. Mo Fan could not even cast the Fleeing Shadow smoothly. It only worked after breaking 4 times in a row. Dragging Bai Tingting with him, Mo Fan turned into a puff of shadow and ran along the walls around the administration building. His shadow quickly moved to the street with shady trees. After moving a great distance away, almost a street apart, the overwhelming presence finally became weaker. You have 4 elements. Bai Tingting stared at Mo Fan in disbelief, her mind totally blank. I'll explain it to you some other time. Mo Fan turned around and glanced at the administration building. The giant lizard had already flown up to the 3rd layer of the building, which consisted of an extended balcony. It circled above the building like an eagle. Suddenly, it flapped its giant wings and dove toward the 2nd layer of the building. Its mouth was wide open like a cave, its fangs were like stalactites hanging right above. The giant lizard tore right at the structure, shattering the cement to pieces, like popping bubbles. Its actual target was the brain of the pseudomorphing demon beast. As its fangs bit down, the pseudomorphing demon beast let out an ear-piercing scream across the entire city. The vines wrapping around the entire building thrashed wildly, almost tearing the whole place down. The pseudomorphing demon beast struggled violently, using its vines to wrap around the giant lizard. Countless vines were drawn out from the windows of the administration building. They began to wrap the giant lizard like tentacles, trying to pull it away from its head. Unfortunately, the vines were as fragile as spiderwebs to the giant lizard. It easily tore them apart with a casual rending before biting even harder. The pseudomorphing demon beast was totally helpless against it.